One, two. All right, we are now live. Got the notification on my phone. That's always a good feeling that it worked. So if you're tuning in and watching, make sure that you're right on there where you're watching from, who you're watching with. And then give us a Nick, are we gonna sing happy birthday to you?
If you want to, that's all up to you.
I don't know. I just
Wes, it's solo time.
No, I'm not a singer. That's all you, Baylor. You Okies can sing to one another.
Hey, Ricky and Michael, thanks for tuning in down in Texas. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll wait a few minutes here. We normally get started about 7:35 or so, or 6:35, wherever you're watching. Normally try to give people a few minutes there to log on. So if you can, please hit the like button that you're watching this post and share it for us so we can make sure this thing gets out to as many people as we can.
I think Ricky was the first one on last week.
Dang, not tardy.
He is studious.
On top of it.
Getting some more people trickling in. That's good. Like I said, we'll give it a couple minutes so people can start watching. I know that I'm going to share it here on my Facebook page here.
Ricky loves Sunglo.
Hey, a big shout out to everybody that's watching this and been watching here for the last month or two and kind of settling in and getting some education. Did we lose Nathan?
I think so.
It booted me off too. I'll shoot him a text real quick. What I was saying too is just thank you to everybody for joining us here the last month or two and kind of going along for the ride and learning as we're learning with this new process in Facebook Live and more or less getting some added information. I think it's been pretty fun for us to sit down with you on Wednesday nights and kind of delve out some information. So we've sure enjoyed having you. Nathan is getting on right now. It kicked him off. The crash, or the site crashed is what he said on his end. So he's jumping back on. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to more or less go through kind of some daily routines and just setting yourself.
I think, Baylor, you and I got the best signal.
I would say so. We're the only ones on right now, aren't we?
Yeah. So I guess we just keep telling everybody to, let us know where you're from and make sure you got good questions for tonight. And I think the topics that we're going to run through till these guys get put back on are going to be well received from those of you out there.
I don't know what happened.
Are you back?
I'm back. Were you guys on the whole time?
Yep. Me and Wes
yeah.
were.
Good.
It got kicked off a second time.
it like literally just, I don't know what happened there. So appreciate you guys keeping the ball rolling. I wasn't concerned. Here comes Nick. There you go. You guys that are tuning in, make sure you're putting on there where you're watching from. I think honestly, I think the Midwest is kind of in the lead on our analytics. So we need to step it up there. You guys down in the South and Southwest.
I saw we had a big Okie and Texas contingency last time, so we're coming after you.
Yeah, that's good.
Sorry for our technical difficulties here as we're getting kicked off.
Yeah, that was a first for me. Honestly, my heart kind of stopped for a second, so I wasn't really sure what happened there. Did you get kicked off the same time I did?
Yeah, it just booted me off, and it booted me off a second time too. I was sitting here watching you guys, but
yeah,
who knows?
So if you're watching, make sure you if you could share this, that'd be great. We get as many people watching this as we can, and a lot of the main reason why is we want to shed as much knowledge and get as much information out there. It's a very open forum, right? I mean, we want people to be able to interact, ask questions, work through all this with us, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this better for everybody. So, all right, we'll get started here in just a minute. Andy's asking if Game On will help us steer. We'll get to that here in a little bit, Andy. We appreciate your question. We'll get to that here in a bit. Short answer, yes. All right, I'll tell you what. You guys want to go ahead and I'll kick it off here. We appreciate you guys joining. Tonight we're going to talk about setting up a routine to maximize your success with your show calf at a beginner level, but also at an advanced level. And we're going to kind of break that down into what that looks like when you first get your calf, what it looks like in the intermediate stage, right in the middle, and then also the last 60 to 90 days, what you need to be doing from a routine standpoint to get the most out of that you possibly can. So with that being said, we'll let the guys introduce themselves and we'll get rolling here. So Wes, go ahead, man.
Oh, hey, Wess Richey. You want to go, Nick? You want to go first?
You go ahead, man. You got it.
Okay. Wess Richey, Northern Indiana. Been living in Plymouth for several years. Employee by Sullivan Supply, dealer relations manager, and also Stock Show U master professor. Been a big advocate of Sunglo for several years, and work alongside my brother in his operation with Richey Show Steers, and then I have a small calf herd called Richey Livestock that I run with my mom and dad as well. But glad to be on. Super excited about how the turnout went last week, and hope we can solve a lot of questions or at least help some people out tonight.
Awesome. Baylor, go ahead.
Baylor Bonham from Newcastle, Oklahoma. If you don't know where that is, it's about 20 minutes south of Oklahoma City. I've grown up here my whole life, still living here. I currently am going to college at Redlands over there in El Reno on a judging scholarship, and that's keeping me awfully busy. And then when I'm not doing that, I still here at the barn helping out here, and I've been raised in this business and believe for everything it stands for, and it's taught me a lot through all these years of showing calves and selling them and etc. Like Wes said about the Sunglo, we are a firm believer. That's all we've ever fed, and I mean, there's just no other way to put it, but that is the top dog in the feed industry in our opinion. So that's about all I got.
We're also not paying Baylor to say that, so we appreciate that.
For sure. Hey, Nick Fitzsimmons here. I work for Sunglo and have for 5 years now, and learned a lot through that whole process, but excited to bring you this information. Aside from working for Sunglo, my wife and I own and operate Fitz Genetics here in Perry, Oklahoma, along with my kids, Lander and newly born brought to us, Lane. And we sell heifers of all different shapes, sizes, breeds, and colors. And so we're going to kind of tell you a few things that we do in our operation, as well as Wes and Baylor tonight. But more than anything in this particular one, we're going to try to keep it as interactive as possible. So, Nathan?
Yeah, we want your questions. That's really what we're here for. I mean, we want to engage with you guys that are tuning in and watching, but at the same time, also know that if you aren't able to take the best notes that you possibly can, it's okay, because this is going to be recorded. You'll be able to go back and watch it. It'll be stuck up here on our Facebook page. But then at the same time, tomorrow, once it gets fully recorded, I'll be able to upload it onto the Sunglo Feeds YouTube channel. So you'll be able to watch them there. And we've got all the videos that we shoot. We keep them cataloged there on our YouTube page. So all you do is search Sunglo Feeds on YouTube and go on there and subscribe if you could. So my name is Nathan Day. I'm happy to work with the three guys that we've got in here tonight. Last week, if you weren't able to join us last week, we talked about the last 60 to 90 days when feeding your steer, and it was incredibly well received. It was a great evening, and we had great conversation, and really made me fired up to go maybe try to help somebody feed their calf. I don't know if I can do it as well as these guys could, but man, I felt pretty empowered there after watching that. So hopefully you're able to take some of the things that we talked about and apply it to your own livestock. That's what we're trying to do, is make sure that you walk out of this thing with at least one idea or one different thought that, man, I never thought about it that way. Maybe I'll try it. We'll see what happens. So again, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll go ahead and get rolling. So the first thing that we're going to talk about tonight is kind of what to do in those first kind of 3 months that you got your calf in, and starting a routine with that calf. So Wes, why don't you go ahead and kick us off with, if let's say you're a beginner, you're just kind of getting rolling here, and you got your calf in, you're all excited, and where do you go from now?
Well, I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's a great place to start with the whole atmosphere of your excitement for a new project. I think, young kids get so excited they want to just, jump in the pen with them and everything like that. And I think the biggest thing is for us, when we first get stuff in, and we recommend to families is that, if it's a new environment, whether it's a broke calf or not a broke calf, it probably is going to take about 24 hours for that animal to kind of get acclimated to its new environment. So we're just going to kind of let them chill, have some hay, some feed and water there for them to just get used to your environment. And then after that, if you've got a calf that has not been broke, we're going to start working on trying to get that breaking process started. If you've got one that is broke, try to, you and a parent kind of get in the pen with it and just kind of feel the calf out. And if it's super tame, you can go up there and start combing on it and get it where the calf trusts you. At the end of the day, I mean, that's going to be the most important thing for that bond to be a trustworthy bond in regards to that. So I think that's very important in terms of the breaking and getting initially started as a beginner with that project. The next several weeks is going to be something in the essence of just learning the routine with your calf. And that may be just from, we've talked about it before, but just setting a routine on feeding, from, hey, I'm going to feed at, 6:30 in the morning before I got to leave for school, but I'm going to make sure that, within a 10 to 12 hour period, I'm going to be feeding that calf again. So in that 5:30 to 6:30 range, I'm going to try to be back out there working with that calf in terms of feeding him and making sure that that calf gets on a routine of when he's going to eat, when he's going to get to drink water, and so on and so forth. So you're going to build that into that as you're in the breaking process, or as you and the animal are starting to get acclimated. And we talked about it last night for a little bit, and just trying to get an idea of some breaking technique. And I think there's a lot of different things that are out there in terms of just saying one's better than another. I guess my personal opinion, and I value these guys' opinion as well, I think each one of us does it a little bit different. And not that there's a right or a wrong, but I think it really just comes down to what kind of facilities do you have, and how does it work best for you? There's guys that let them drag a halter for a while. There's guys that tie them right up right away. There's guys that, put them in an alleyway and tie them up and let them just stand there tied where they can't move. But they get used to staying tied up to, for God's sake, I hope you don't put them on a donkey right out of the gate. But, But, that being said, I think you got to just find what works for you and the calf. But working to try to get a goal with that animal and that kid trusting one another is the most important thing. And feeding and watering that calf, and if it's the same person, if it's that kid that's giving them that animal the feed and the water every day, that also builds confidence with that animal and that kid. And I can't say it enough, and we joke around about it here at the house, but I'll give her a little props. Alice is really good at walking around in the barnyard or just sitting on the fence line reading a book with the calf out in the pen. And next thing you know, I mean, we got one this year that I still, to this day, we don't really know how she really likes anybody at all, but she sure likes Dallas. And he's the only one that can get away with giving her a kiss on the cheek or patting her on the forehead without her not wanting to go backwards or do something kind of goofy. But, that kid and that calf create a bond, and that's what's going to really help you when it comes to showing and the things that you're going to do down the road. So those are some things right out of the gate, feeding routine, watering routine, getting that calf broken that first 30 days, getting that calf used to a show stick. There's a lot of things that you can get into, and I can let Baylor talk about the show stick side and getting them a little more comfortable in that first 30 to 60 days of the showmanship side of things as well.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things that Wes said. And, after you get your foundation built and kind of build your bond with that calf to where they trust you, then you can kind of start, doing hands-on stuff with them and starting the show stick on them. And, first thing that I tell everybody or that when they come here is, if they've never had a show stick on them before, you don't just want to walk up to them and just go directly to their belly and just start scratching, because, that is one way to get off to a bad start with an animal. And then it takes you 10 minutes to get them to where they are comfortable again. So, when you walk up to that calf, I typically just run it down their top line just a little bit and kind of get them to where they're comfortable with it, and then work it down their legs and everything else, and just kind of get them to where they feel it all right. And then, go to scratching them. And you want to scratch those things for just a little bit, and then you can go to messing with their feet. But, you want to do this for the first time when they're tied up to a fence, that a way that they don't have a bad experience and it turn around and be a bad experience for them. You always want to go upwards with things. So, once you get past that, then you want to break your calf to lead. That can be a really frustrating part. People that are fortunate enough to have another one, maybe there at their barn, if you have more than one, I recommend getting the other one out there with them and walking them side by side or the other one in front of them, because that just makes them feel more comfortable to where they can get out there and learn from the other one. And then once they start walking and everything starts coming together, then you can worry about setting their feet right and loining them and holding their head right and everything else. But the bond is where it all starts. And then once you get that down, then you can start on the showmanship. And then once you get the showmanship down, then you kind of get into picking some shows you want to go to and stuff like that. And then by the time that comes around, you're ready for it. That's just kind of where you want to start off as far as what we do here,
I would agree. And just to add in a couple of things there, I would say don't try to make your calf look like he's winning in the show ring the first time you go to using that show stick, and take it easy. You're not trying to get him set up perfect even the first 10 times. You're just trying to get him used to that show stick. And I know some families that I've helped over the years, they call me as soon as, they tried to set their calf up for the first time, and they said, well, we touched the show stick to him and he blew up or something along those lines. And you kind of talk through the whole scenario, and you find out after the fact that they probably had their calf's head held a little bit too high maybe that first time, and that's a little uncomfortable. Or maybe they just went right to scratching him on his belly, and he'd never had that happen before, or went and touched a leg, and that's not a natural thing for an animal for you to just go tapping on a leg. And so I think, Baylor, you touched on that. I would go easy the very first time, and then the next handful of times when you're doing that. It doesn't have to be set up perfect, just try to make sure you're building that bond. And along with that, Wes kind of touched on this. I would make sure as you go in there and feed them like Dallas does, you need to be the person feeding your calf and going in there. And every time they come up to the feed bunk, as you're still mixing stuff in there, that's a good sign that you're on the right path to getting that calf broke and calm down. The one other thing that I would add in as like a day one type of process, and then I think we did a great job with this first segment, would be the trailer ride home. And I'm not going to hit on this real hard, but make sure that you have your trailer bedded down good. And if you bought a calf that's maybe just a shot fast, go find a calf that maybe you showed at your county fair and you're done with, or an old show heifer out of the pasture, and throw them in there. Those two things, make sure that they're not rattling down the road on not enough bedding. And if they need a buddy, go ahead and find them a buddy calf for the way home. It makes your life thereafter quite a bit easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one thing that I get a few questions about, and I don't know about you guys, but we tend to get like, how long should you leave one tied up? And I think in this early stage of the calf's life, the length is as important as the height. You hit on it in their neck, like too high, or, I think the thing is like, just start out for 5 to 10 minutes, let that calf get used to it, and then just kind of gradually build it up to where, you've got a calf tied up for an hour or so, and you're working on them and you're doing your routine and whatever that may be. When it comes to a routine per se, in terms of what, daily care or something like that, I think that really comes down to what fits your schedule. Working hair or, blowing them out or something like that. I always recommend it if you're a family that, has got a fresh one and you're just kind of getting going and you're not really got a target show that's in, 90 days, you're, a little further out, then, running a blower, getting that dust and dirt out on a regular basis and giving them a bath once a week or something like that, so that calf gets acclimated to that kind of stuff, is very important. As you're going along, that animal should become part of that routine. It should be, if you're feeding at 6:30 in the morning and you're going to work hair on a weekend and you're going to wash, then you feed at 6:30 and you're going to do your routine of taking care of your animal from 7 to 8:30 or 9 o'clock, whatever that may be, and then keep that consistent so that calf gets comfortable with that, because you're building a great foundation for the next 100 some plus days, because what we're going to talk about as we go along, it's the foundation that you're building right now is what you're going to build upon as you go through the middle part of that calf's life cycle to the end of that calf's life cycle in his show career or her show career, in regards to that. So
absolutely, I completely agree. And like you had kind of alluded to, make sure that your schedule is attainable for a long period of time. I know some people will set their schedule and maybe they're feeding right off the bat. They're early as they first get their calf, and then as they continue to go through their show season, maybe they lose interest a little bit, or inevitably you're going to get a little bit tired. And so make sure you're thinking about that when you first start feeding your calf and setting that schedule as something that you can achieve every day. Don't set it at 5 a.m. if you're not a morning person. Maybe you want to feed it at 7:30 or something along those lines, as long as it's still cool out. I think that's a great thing to touch on. Would you too? I don't know what we got going here from a technical standpoint, Wes, but maybe what's the differences here as we're talking about a beginner level versus in this same first phase? How would that change if you are maybe someone that's been doing it for a while and have some added experience?
Well, I think the more experienced individuals are going to be able to adapt probably quicker. If there's anything, they've experienced, an animal or something like that, and so they're going to have these really good building blocks that they have built and they are comfortable with and they know. I think the thing that for them is if you're going to be advanced and maybe you think that you got a show coming up a little bit quicker, you need to make sure that you prioritize what you're doing as you're moving forward towards that. And that could be, getting the show stick on them a little sooner than you would before, maybe getting a show halter on them. I think that's the one thing that I see a lot when cattle come back to get ready to go to a show. at some point in their life is that they don't spend the time with the animal with a show halter on them prior to going to a show. You know, I remember back when Shane and I showed, and it's something we've even put with Dallas is that we work hard to try to convince those families and her that, you know, we need to practice multiple times with a show halter, whether it's a rope halter and a show halter at the same time, or if it's a cruise control halter and a rope halter at the same time. Get that calf comfortable with whatever headgear you're going to put them in the ring with. Get that done sooner. You know, and I think that helps so that calf, when he gets to the ring, the only thing that's out of normal for him when he shows up for show day is the quote unquote the venue that he's going to go to. You know, when you get to the show, let's try to get him in the ring at least once to experience what the walking around and what's going on, and then go from there. I mean, it's imperative to make sure that animal has the best opportunity for success when you're showing them, because I know we talk about it in the stock show youth clinics and everything, and a lot of people kind of get a little hesitant because they don't really think about it, but we'll spend a lot of time not only in the barn feeding and taking care of a calf and getting it all ready to go to the show for less than 10 minutes in the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we want to make sure that all of our hard work at home is showed through when we get to the show. And sometimes, you know, the barometric pressure could be off and that calf just doesn't feel right for that day. And he's going to be, or she's going to be off. But we want to give them as much opportunity to be successful as we can and leave Mother Nature and the venue up to what we can. So.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say the other thing from an experience level that we had talked about yesterday when we were just kind of hashing out what we wanted to discuss is maybe if you are a beginner, you're going to have a big team that's helping you through this first part of your show calf, and I think that's awesome. But even as an experienced showman, I think you're still going to have a team around you. You're maybe just going to have that honed in and specified as to the things that you really need help with. And so that's something that I would look at from an experience level. Maybe there's a couple less people that are around on a regular basis, but they maybe fill your gaps a little bit more as to what you need help with. I think that can change things too. The other thing that I would say from an experience level in this first period is we always try to get the best calf in our barns as we're showing, and everybody tries to. But as you get older, inevitably, it seems like maybe you figured out the kind of calf that you'd like to feed and what works best for your scenario, or maybe you've been saving up and you're through the latter part of your show career and now you can really go buy the one that you need. And so with an experience scenario, hopefully you have the best one possible and there's a few less room for error. And so that would be the other thing too in this first phase that you're looking at. There's not really any time to be messing around. And so from the word go, if you have a good one in the barn, there's no room for error, and you're trying to make sure everything's going right with no hitches from the get-go. So, yep. Nathan, we had a little bit of issues there, but what we more or less did is we tidied up this first phase and talked about both finishing the beginner and then as well as the experience. So
good deal. Yeah, sorry about that. No idea what happened. Let's move on then to we kind of broke it down by month, right? Almost by the first 3 months that you've got your calf. Now we're on to those middle months. You know, when we talked last night, you know, you guys had lots of different things that I'd never really even thought about that takes place kind of right in those middle months, as far as what your daily routine needs to look like. So that way you can roll into the last 3 months ready to roll. So Wes, go ahead and kind of elaborate on what we discussed last night for the folks watching.
I mean, I think it depends on where you're at in the country. We were talking about that. I mean, depending on what part of the country you're in, depends on what kind of environment that you're working with. But I'm going to speak on kind of the northern half of the United States, at least in the Midwest, and what we work with. You know, as we're approaching that middle part of that calf's life cycle, we're going to be in, you know, could be that January, February, March, you know, April timeline. And we're going to be dealing with some colder temperatures and things like that. And so for us, you know, if we're not heavily showing, we're going to keep our routine where we're just going to keep the calf bathed, one day a week or something like that, try to get it warmed up and spend lots of time getting it good and dry. We're also going to evaluate where we're at in terms of a weight gain. We're going to evaluate what our end goal is going to be and if we're going to achieve that, because this is going to be that opportunity to tie in last week's information in terms of how do we maximize a calf that maybe is a little bit behind or a little skinnier built, or you got one that you got to hold a little bit more, or you got that one that's just absolutely dead on. You don't really got to do a whole lot, and we're just trying to keep it in the lines. That's what we're going to look at and try to evaluate our situation there. I mean, yeah, we're going to be showing, don't get me wrong, but we're also going to be evaluating, are we gaining weight? Are daily gains good? And we're going to let that calf, what I'm going to call rest. I'm going to let it be a cow, so to speak. And we're going to try to, let them hang out, eat on a round bale during the day. They're going to get their feed and they're going to get their water, on their routine of timeline. But we're not going to overwork them per se, because what we know is that we're going to try to maximize everything that we can in the last 60 to 90 days, whether that's a hair coat or a finishing or whatever it may be, that we're going to try to maximize in this third segment. We're going to take the middle section and just kind of take a pause. And we're going to rest, and not only personally, but also that calf, because you've put it through a lot of different environments in that first 3 months of its life. Could be fresh weaned. It could have been broke. It could have been moved around on a trailer from, individual to individual before you get your hands on it. You may have went all the way to Nebraska and bought a calf, and you got to get it back. And, it's in a new environment. We've got it broke. We're getting her set up with a routine. That animal is going to need a small little rest, so to speak. And we're going to do that in that period. But the big thing is just evaluating our end goal. Are we on target? What do we need to do, make changes? Because it's inevitable. We've talked about this before, but when it comes to feeding and things like that, I didn't mention it last week, but I'll mention it this week. And it also is part of what the last stage is in terms of daily hair care with that animal. But, every 30 days, you should take a picture or something of that animal or a video and evaluate your progress with that calf, because you don't want to try to fix anything the last 30 days, because it's just going to be really hard to do on this size of an animal. Maybe you can get away with it on a pig or a goat or a sheep, but on a large bovine like this, we're going to be, trying to make adjustments a little bit sooner. And so we're going to be working with that kind of routine in that mid 3 months, is evaluating our feed program, evaluating our calf endpoint, whether it's a heifer or whether it's a steer. If it's a heifer, we could be looking at getting that thing bred and making sure that we got it safe in terms of that side of things. And we're bred. We've got a good 42 to 90 days out, and we're headed into the spring and in the summertime, right on track to where we want to be.
Yeah. Baylor, why don't you touch on, I know that you've hit on it a few times. You guys like to let those things just be calves and hang out, and maybe not push on them quite as hard. But in this same time frame when you're doing that, I know you guys also like to sneak up to some of those jackpot shows, whether it be in Nebraska or to go to the blackout jackpot, one of those things. And so how are you kind of falling on either side of that, letting them hang out and just be a show calf, or be a cow, I guess, more or less, but then still trying to go hit a few shows? How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. We do like to go to some of those prospect shows, and when you're in the middle stage there, we like to put those things under the barn and get them up. I mean, you don't have to rinse them every day. I mean, of course, if you're getting ready to go to a show, then you want to get your hair right and everything else. But predominantly, you just want to keep those things under the barn and keep them cool. I mean, if it's the summertime, but if not, I mean, still in the wintertime, you don't just want to have them baking or out there with the sun. I mean, of course, if they're colored, but we like to take those things up there to some of those shows and just kind of see how they react and what we can change to when they get big and kind of see how they look in the ring and everything else. But for the most part, we keep them there under the barn and just try to keep a good eye on them and rinse them. I mean, a few times a week, and to still keep that hair good. But we don't want to stress those things too much because you're in the middle stage, like you said, and you kind of want to let them rest. But you just want to kind of find a happy medium between everything. And one thing that I was going to say that I thought of when Wes was talking is when you go to those shows and you get out and take your project, you really listen to the judge whenever he's describing your calf. I mean, for instance, he could say this one needs just a few more days on feed. He's a little bit behind the ones in his class. He's a little bit skinny, or they could say this one's a little far ahead. He's a little quick in his makeup. I'd like to take this one and just burn a little fat off of him. And I think you can take a lot away from that when you take them to shows, because it will take what they say and go back to your barn and do that stuff that you hear from them. And a lot of people always tell me when I tell them about finisher and grower for the Sunglo feed and everything else. I mean, you don't just have to feed grower by itself or finisher by itself. I mean, I'm a firm believer in that. You can balance those two and find a ratio that works good with your calf. It might take you a second to get the perfect amount of each, but I like the way those things blend together and kind of find a happy medium. For instance, in your middle stage, when you're not trying to get them too fat, but still keep them there lean enough to where you're still working up in progress whenever you start burning on them there the last 60 days. I really do like mixing those feeds and just the way the cattle handle it and everything else. But like you said about going to those shows and everything, we just try to find a happy medium to where the calf stays comfortable but still looks good, of course, when we go out. And I mean, that's just about our routine for the winter time. I mean, summertime, whenever. That's kind of what we do.
Yeah, I'd agree completely. And on those shows, this middle section, as we touched on a few times, you're probably not working on them quite as diligently as maybe you are in the first phase or the last phase. In the first phase, because you're trying to buddy up to them. The last phase, you're just trying to get every last little bit out of them and go try to win a show. But the middle section, although you're maybe not working on them quite as much or quite as much as maybe you are on either side, that's really when you're going to be doing the majority of your showing. If you like to go to jackpot shows, that middle phase is when you're going to the most shows. And so one thing that I would tell all my families is inevitably you're going to want to do good at one jackpot show. You want to do good at all of them, but there's typically one that you want to really do good at. And what I tell each and every one of them is make sure that you go to a show prior to that you don't care if you win or not, because it's maybe going to not go perfect the first time. And I think everybody here can go into some stories as to, the first time you went to a show with a calf and it didn't go perfect. And so try to pick one show that obviously you always want to do good at, but you're not dead set on winning it before you go to that show that you really want to do good at. And the other thing too, in this middle phase, is you're trying to get everything in front of that calf as far as scenarios now before you get to game time in that last push. When you're trying to make sure that they're as efficient as possible, everything's moving in the right direction. Now's kind of when you push everything in front of them as far as going to fairgrounds that they're not used to, or maybe drinking some chlorinated water, or maybe messing with your fill a little bit. Or like Baylor said, I know their crew, they like to use finisher earlier on in their feeding phase. Those things that you learn along the way that you like in terms of your own feeding style or the kind of calf that you have around. This middle section is when I think you probably find out the most about your calf as you're going to these jackpot shows. You've already kind of built that relationship, and then now you're really trying to figure out, what's this calf going to do when it's game time. And you find out a lot about yourself, I think, in those same scenarios as far as what you like to.
I think something else to add to that is the showmanship side of things. And we talk about, part of your routine and part of our routine, when we were growing up is that every Sunday in the afternoon, we would practice showmanship for 15 to 20 minutes, 30 minutes. And that calf never got a break. And that was physically walking out there, setting them up and evaluating it and making sure that they understood that there is an off season, so to speak, but there's also the season still is continuing, so to speak. But there's something also to be said about practicing, making that calf have muscle memorization. And when they're tied up and you're working on them, on that Sunday or whatever it may be, or if it's a midday of the week, tying them up just to blow them out. And when you get home from school, blow them out quick, tie them up, blow them out, make sure their feet are set like they're supposed to if they're in a side profile or when they're set up side by side, tied up, just so that they don't forget that it's still part of it's game time. We got to go out there and try to be as competitive as we can. And that's the big thing, is just working them animals that kind of way. I'm not saying that you got to, wash them every day, but you darn sure need to kind of blow them out. Make sure you checking for ringworm and checking for lice and things like that, because this time of the life cycle, that's what we're going to be dealing with if you're showing a lot, especially if you're showing a lot.
Absolutely. I know Baylor and I have talked about it too, and Wes had touched on it earlier. Although we don't enjoy the cold weather as much as maybe he does when he's in this middle section, it still does cool off down here. And one thing that Baylor and I had talked about is inevitably in this time of year, the humidity is going to go away and it's going to get a little bit colder. And so regardless of where you live, make sure you're keeping that hide moisturized, regardless of what products you use. I know we like to use Revive, or even we'll go old school and use some Double Dip. Some guys up in Wes's region will go as extensively into, rag oil. I think you maybe need to be a bit more careful there. But regardless of what you want to do there, make sure when you wash your calf, you get their skin completely dry, and then go back in with the moisturizer, because this is the time of year, like Wes was just touching on, you're going to get some dry, scaly skin. And you need to stay on top of that now, so you're not inhibiting hair growth later on in their life. Do we have any questions here at this point?
Nathan, I think your mic is off.
Difficulties. Go ahead, Baylor.
What was I going to say? Oh my gosh, I just forgot.
Hey, Baylor, touch on West hit on it a little bit early on, but how long are you guys in this phase, even though we're maybe not working on them every day? When you do have them up, how long do you have them tied up, when you're washing them, and then thereafter, how long are you keeping them tied up just to keep them in the routine on those days that you are working on them? I know that's a question that we get pretty frequently, is how long do I need to keep them tied up?
I think whenever you get those things up and you tie them up and on the wash rack and go to working on them and washing them there and stuff, I mean, that takes a good 45 minutes to an hour if you really bear down and get that skin dry and get the hair going the right way and stuff like that. But after we get done, we like to take them back there in the barn and tie them under the fans there with their head up for probably another hour, I would say, for ones like this, maybe even shorter than that, 30 minutes to an hour under the fan. That way they just kind of know what's going on and they get in that routine. And then by the time they get bigger and you really go to honing down on them things, you just keep increasing that time to where when you're at the show, when they're fat steers, they can stand for a while, and hopefully you do, because hopefully they have to stand and go back to the big finale there at the end. But we do keep those things up for probably hour and a half to an hour and 45 minutes whenever they're in that middle stage, just to kind of keep their mind fresh and keep that muscle memory good. And so they always have an idea kind of what's going on, and they're not ever getting boogered on you or anything like that.
Wes, are you guys kind of in the same boat, having them up there for a few hours?
Yeah, I think the big thing, absolutely doing that. I mean, we're going to try to make sure that calf is comfortable, in that hour and a half to 2 hour span after they're good and dry. It's going to probably take us a good hour and a half to dry one in the cold weather up here with some heat. Sometimes when we're at shows, in Michigan or over in Ohio, we'll put a nice little space heater back behind the blowers and try to blow some warm air towards them. But we're going to put 2 or 3 or 4. If we've got a group of families together, we're going to kick all the generators on turn 3 or 4 double blower setups on and really get that calf dry and spend the time making sure, because you'll notice that calf at some point is going to go through a sweat when its body temperature gets back to normal, and you're going to have to make sure you get that moisture out. I know, like right here where Shane lives in this part of the country, we're 15 minutes from Lake Michigan, and I mean, when it gets cold, and you cannot afford to turn one out with any kind of moisture on it at all, because it's going to get sick. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah. Awesome. I would say in closing here, and I know that whenever we first started this, we were talking about experienced versus maybe a beginner. And in this middle section, I would say if you're a beginner, make sure that you're letting your calf kind of just do a little bit more hanging out and being a cow and doing some growing. I think that's something that we forget about at times. And then on those days when you're working on them, make sure you pour a little water on them, get them good and dry, and work on your showmanship. And then if you're an experienced showman in this same phase, you're maybe going to a few more shows and you're kind of going through the intricacies of how to get to a show and keeping your calf full, and then how to weigh in if you're a steer, or get through your check-in lines if you're a heifer. All those little different things that maybe come with going to a few more shows, I think would follow up with being experienced. But as we tail off here in this midsection, and I think this sets us up nicely into the last section, or the last push that maybe we touched on there in the last Facebook Live, but we're going to go at it from a different angle. Let's talk just real quick about getting that winter hair off of them and shedding them, and kind of your guys' preference. I think that's something that I get as much questions about as anything. So as we're finishing this middle phase and going into that last push, how do you guys like to get that dead hair off them to make sure that you're ready for fresh, good fuzz to come back in through that last phase? Baylor, you want to kick us off on that?
Yeah. We just use that shedding comb for the most part that Sullivan sells there. We feel like that works really good. I mean, we use that quite often this time of year, leading into that, like you said, just to keep that hair always fresh, because it predominantly pulls that stuff that's dead out of there. And I mean, if you have a black one, you know what I'm talking about, when it's all brown and patchy and stuff and not smooth looking, it's not any fun to look at. So you might as well just go ahead and get it out of there. But we do that. I mean, it all depends on the calf sometimes, because you got those freaks that always have hair there, and it's hard to get out sometimes. And if that's the case, then you might want to pluck them and just kind of leave their quarter and their belly hairier there, right there, and then clip their tail head in them and stuff like that, and of course leave their legs and stuff. But it all depends on the calf. But sometimes we do pluck them, but for the most part we do use that shedding comb, and use that pretty righteously this time of year.
Yeah, Wes, what's your take on that? I have a feeling you go by the moon sign and you do a little shearing, but I could be wrong.
A little of both. I think it depends on the calf. This year we had some that we just didn't feel comfortable shearing off by the sign. And then there's some others that, we went ahead and did that with. And, I tend to be a little more cautious. When I say shear one off, I'm probably not your atypical southern shear guy. I'm going to leave 1/2 inch to 3/4 on them, even 5/8 sometimes. And I'm going to leave them just a little furrier. I had one last year that I learned on my own. It was not something that was, I wanted to do, but it was a sign, and it was one that we were going to show later. And I went ahead in June and we decided to shear him off. And I just took 71/12s to him and just sheared him. And I sheared him, what we would call, like Baylor was talking about, like a pluck area. I left his tail head hair, I left his quarter hair, left his leg hair, and I left his belly hair. But for the most part, the rest of him, he was tight. And it took everything we had with not only our barn help, but us as a group and team to make sure that thing had the right kind of hair by Louisville time. And that was a calf that was pretty hairy when he showed up at the house. I mean, that thing, was one of the biggest jack-haired ones we've ever had. And I learned real quick that when you take them that tight, it probably wasn't the smartest decision, because his leg hair that we left and his belly hair that we left was ginormous, but it was his body hair and his back hair that just wasn't quite where it needed to be when we got to Louisville time. And I'm not saying it kept us from being in the hunt or out of the hunt, but second in class was what we got, and that calf was damn sure presented to his highest ability. But I think his density and the quality of his hair wasn't quite where it would have been if we'd have had another 35, 40 days, because it was really making some big changes that last 15 days before we went into Louisville. And if I think we'd have had another 35, 40 days, it could have been really, really good. And so we took a step back as a group, and we decided that if we're going to shear one, we're not going to shear them as tight as what we had in the past. But it depended on the calf. I'm on a red-hided one. I'm probably not going to shear them. I'm going to shed comb that thing, brush and rice root brush and rubber scrub, really start working and training that next generation of hair coming. On a white one, I'm a little hesitant on shearing them as well. I mean, I've had some luck with them. They got a good silver undertone or a black, like a darker colored hide. I think you can get away with it. But those true blue kind of white colored ones or that pale skin underneath, you take a chance of them things maybe not growing back quite as fast, or they'll get sunburn out there and they really slow down on that growing of the hair as well. So, just that kind of portion of it tends to play into the role as well.
Perfect.
That's great info. I think that kind of really leads into logically the last 60 to 90 days. And I know that we talked quite a bit about the last 60 to 90 days in our last Facebook Live. And again, if you've not seen that, it's on our Facebook page. Just got to scroll down a little bit or jump on YouTube and search Sunglo feeds and you'll find it. But guys, kind of walk through me. Let's say I'm a beginner and my county fair is getting ready to come up the middle. For us, it was the third week of July. We're about at that stage right now, and for 60 days out roughly. So kind of tell me, man, I need to get my butt up out of bed. I need to get rolling. I need to go brush my calf. I need to dry him off. Let's walk through a scenario where let's say that a person doesn't have a cooler, right? They maybe only have one fan or something. And for them, they don't have all of the fanciest amenities because not everybody has that. So kind of walk through what a good routine could look like if you're just getting rolling, or if you maybe don't have some of the nicer amenities, but you have a nice place to start from and a good launching pad. How can you maximize your success with what you got?
Hey, I'll kick us off on this because Nathan essentially just described my setup as a little kid. And I was that kid who never had a cooler. I had a couple fans. I had a dark barn that I kind of set up for my show calf. And everything actually was at my grandma's house, which was a mile up the road. So I jumped on my bike and I rode up there and worked on my calf. And that's where I fell in love with this game. And I didn't ever have the nicest setup, but we did some good and we did some winning in that setup. But I would tell anybody, you can do whatever you want regardless of your setup as long as you're willing to work hard. And so I did. I woke up early. And I went up there, I rode my bike up there. I got my calf put in under the fans after I got them rinsed off and worked hair real good. Grandma made me a nice little bit of breakfast, hung out for a while. Then I got a midday rinse, and then I did rinse again before we kicked out at night. And I know there's kind of some, not controversy, but some different thoughts on whether or not you kick them out wet. We never did because it was still pretty humid where we lived, but a lot of rinsing, making sure that you're getting their hair worked at all times. And I am a firm believer in a dark scenario as far as where you're keeping your calf is a lot bigger deal than the temperature. It obviously needs to be cooler. The cooler, the better. But I do think that there is something to be said for having them in a dark barn as far as growing hair. And so that would be my biggest recommendations there. Make sure you're brushing your hair. Make sure you're keeping them blow dried and keeping their skin dry whenever you're blowing them out, but then putting some moisture back into them. But like I said, I never did have a cooler, and we could sure enough get them hairy just by some extra elbow grease. So what about you guys in that same scenario? I know that's probably the biggest one that we get asked about is, do we need a cooler? And Wes, you had talked about you got families that have both. So you want to maybe touch on maybe the differences back and forth.
Yeah, I think the big thing is that whether you're in a cooler or whether you're not, training that body hair, leg hair, and all this stuff is imperative if you want to have some success with your grooming and fitting abilities at the end. And we talked about it last night is why do we want this hair? Why do we want this? And I think the biggest thing is it kind of falls a little bit in the same kind of category as why do we wash our own hair when we go out on the town at night? Why do we do this? We want to be presentable. We want to be, look and have a little bit of extra class to ourselves and feel proud about what we've spent the last 60, 90 days doing. And sometimes a little bit of hair makes your animal look just a little bit sharper. It's like a nice little, put a tie on a nice shirt. It just gives you a little bit more class. But I think the big thing is that it's part of the routine in terms of training and being involved with your animal. And it's a little more than just standing there with a show stick. We're working that hair, we're training, we're making that hair coat look the right way. And there's a lot of different ways to do things, but I really work hard on trying to get kids to understand that, training that hair for 30 days of straight forward and then another 30 days of straight forward and then moving it up at a 45-degree angle. And then, keep building on that to where that last 30 days or 60 days or whatever it may be, or last 15 days, you're kind of getting that hair combed and blowed out or whatever it may be towards that end goal, which your animal wants to look like when you're in the ring. But whether you have a cooler or not, I think that's a very imperative part of your play. Now, those of you that have a cooler, I'm going to be honest with you. Everybody always asks me, well, should we get a cooler room? And I just ask them, how hard do you want to work? And their response is, well, I don't want to work very hard. I said, well, then don't own a cooler room. Because if you're going to have a cooler, you're going to have to get up earlier. You're going to have to stay later, and you're going to be a little bit colder than the rest, but you're going to have to be in that barn watching them because they're in a controlled environment. And if the power goes out, it's a bad news. You can get away with the power going out when your calf is just under fans in a barn. And if you're going to have a cooler room, you might as well not worry about having much of a social life throughout the summer. And in regards to that, and it's part of what level of success do you want to have? And I've had families tell me, well, I only can win without a cooler. I can't win unless I got a cooler room. And I will beg to differ with that. I got a 10-year-old niece that'll tell you that rinsing 2 or 3 times a day, and she had a red heifer that had a lot of success last year, and that came from a lot of elbow grease of her and her dad and her mom out there on the wash rack 2 or 3 times a day working that calf. And, it's just one of the things where I think that you can have success without a cooler room. Does it make life easier? Yeah, to an extent, but I don't know if it makes it that much easier. Another thing that I get asked on top of that is what kind of temperature should you run if you do have a cool room? And if you've got heifers, 50 is as low as I've ever want to be. I'm probably a 55 to 60 degrees. Steers, maybe a little bit less than that. You can get a little less than 50, but I think as you're working towards your endpoint, you need to be warming that cooler up so that them cattle are acclimated with that temperature that they're going to be exposed to on a regular basis. But the biggest thing is knowing that training that hair and taking care of that calf and building that routine that you probably built when you started in that first 30 to 90 days is going to be some of the same things that you're going to do now in terms of working that calf on a regular basis, keeping the same routine of feed, water, and all that stuff are all going to be part of that routine that you built the first phase, are going to be the same things that you're going to do in this last phase.
I think that leads in perfect to help me out to describe some stuff, for our Tulsa State Fair down here. I mean, sports is obviously a big factor around everywhere around the world, but I mean, there's a lot of families that are here in Oklahoma that when we talk about buying a Tulsa calf and stuff like that, they're hesitant because, like Wes said, I mean, if you have a cooler, then you don't have much of a social life all summer. And that's when a lot of these customers start second guessing getting one of those Tulsa ones, because it takes your summer away. And even if you don't have a cooler, I mean, it's just as hard to get out there and brush and grow that hair and kick them out late at night and get up early in the morning. But I do have a story I want to tell. My Aunt Jill, which is my dad's sister. She, back when she used to live in Chickasha, she had a cooler, a 2-calf cooler, and she also had like this tarp, not a tarp, but like a net deal that, I mean, I don't really know how she put it together, but it was under some trees, and it was darker than you can imagine in there. And she usually had about 4 or 5 there at a time, but I don't know how she split them up to go in either of them. But those calves that were in that dark area, she worked on just the same as she did in the cooler ones. And sometimes those ones that were outside in that dark room did have just as good a hair, if not better, as in the cooler. So if you do not have a cooler, do not think that puts you behind the 8 ball. That just gives you more ambition to say, I want to grow just as much hair as those people that do have a cooler, which makes you strive even harder to get out there and brush, get up early, go out late at night, kick them out, and just keep your routine the same. And just whenever you're coming into these last couple of months, you want to make sure that you perfect your routine and work even harder, because it does not matter how good you think your calf looks. If he's not 100% whenever he goes to that show and walks in the show ring, it's not going to be a good deal. And you don't want to look back on it and say, I could have worked harder here. I could have done this different. You want to leave it all out there on the line and push as hard as you can, because striving for excellence is the best feeling. And when it pays off, it's even better.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go run through a brick wall right now.
One last thing to touch on growing hair, and it's something that I recommend to everybody, not only because I worked for Sunglo, but because I think it works, but to all of our customers, to feed Epic. And it's a hair supplement that we feel very strongly works. It's a non-melatonin product, so for anybody listening, that means if you do accidentally miss a day, if your kid feeds one time and he forgets to put it in there, you're not going to spit every last bit of their hair like you would on a melatonin product. And so I think that's a big added bonus. It's something that you can keep in their feed throughout the entirety of the year if you want to. It's not overly expensive, and it does help quite a bit with just some density of base coat. One last thing, too, to touch on, I know Wes and Baylor maybe are pushing a bit more from the steer side, and then obviously Wes said his niece is showing heifers. But if you feel very strongly that you can't win because you don't have a cooler, I would tell you just go buy a show heifer. And that would pretty well clear everything up, because I've listened to an argument that to win a steer show, you might need some extra help. But in the heifer ring, I don't think they need to be quite as hairy as they used to be. And so you can win every heifer show in the country with some hard work and don't need a cooler, I think, in today's industry. So I think that's something to certainly keep in mind. And to finalize kind of this last little bit, I know we're running short on time. Maybe you guys run around the horn real quick and tell us, as you're getting ready for the show, what are those couple things that you're looking at as you're making that final push in the last couple weeks that you're looking at on your calf to try to perfect? I know it's different on every one of them, but we've talked about it. We talked about it offline, but fat cover, or maybe making sure that you clip them just a little bit different here or there. Nathan said when he was a little kid, he didn't know why we were putting all the hair back on him. And so maybe one of you guys can touch about, we got to grow this hair so that way eventually we can clip it off in the right spots. We just lost Wes. We're having all kinds of difficulties. But Baylor, will you touch on that? Maybe, we're growing hair, but why do we have it? And, then we got to clip it off. And what are we looking for in those scenarios?
The things that I would say come to mind whenever you bring that up, Nick, is, whenever you're a month out to less than that from the Fat Steer show, when it all counts, I think that by that time you've had the first and the second stage and some of the third stage to work on showmanship on that calf. And by the time that you get down there to the end point, you should be able to not even have to use a show stick. I mean, you should be able to take that calf out there in the pen and boom, just walk into it perfect. Because once you, like Wes was talking about muscle memory, once you do that for so long and they start to learn, that's when it really matters, is because whenever you're in that ring, I mean, just for instance, a judge looks at a calf for maybe 3 minutes max in the ring, and you want to make sure you get the full effect out of all 3 minutes of that. So by the time that those things go to the show, showmanship should be not even a question. You should have that down to a T and really, really be able to get it on whenever you get in the ring. Another thing is fat cover, like Nick said. I think those things, some of them are kind of deceiving because some of them may be a little deeper bodied and look like they're pretty fat, but once you get your hands on them, they may be a little bit of harder muscle type of cattle that are still a little bit bare, and you want to make sure that you give yourself plenty of time leading into that end product to where you can get a little bit more fat on that calf if you need to, or vice versa, burn a little bit off if they're getting kind of feel a little mellowy or something like that, to where you can get that burned off and crispen them back up. But just the fine things that we look at is, I mean, you just kind of want to make sure your calf is good in every aspect and showmanship is down. And I'll let the master professor talk about the hair and clipping part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the hair side of it is that, if you've got one that you think you need to have dyed or something like that, you need to make sure you take care of that, right, handful of days before you go. That way you're not trying to, get to the show and be like, have to do it all over again because something, maybe didn't get quite right, or you didn't get enough in a spot if you got a black hided one. But I think the biggest thing is keeping that hide and that hair, whether it's healthy, we call it healthy hydrated, but it's a combination of things. Is that hide has got to have some nourishment in it. That hair's got to have some nourishment in it. We've got it trained, spend some time getting them clipped. When we do clinics and stuff like that, we tell everybody you can't clip one for a show in the first try, but you also can't bear down on them very hard either, because that hair, if you've been working it and it's got some kind of length to it and it's been worked, it's going to take some layers to get it off, and you're going to have to take a few layers off to get down to where you can get the extra dirt and stuff out of them that's underneath all that hair. Because, I mean, I've been around them long enough, and I know everybody else on this call has been as well, but, we can think we've got them clean, but until you get a couple layers of hair off, you really won't really know if you've got them extra clean underneath all that. And, when you take a couple layers off and you get an extra couple baths in them, that hair will pop in some places that you probably won't expect it. So I try to tend to take some time. I'm going to, if I got a state fair caliber one, we're going to clip them, 3 or 4 times, maybe even 5 if it needs it. And make sure we spend some time doing that. Even if it's a county fair and you've got a nice haired one, take some time. Don't hesitate to finish out your project with as much success as humanly possible. And make sure you take time. And if you've got questions, step back and ask some questions with your team. If you're an experienced individual and you're still not maybe quite 100% comfortable with the clipping side of things, lean on some others out there. I mean, you can't be afraid to pick up the phone and call. I mean, you don't learn unless you try, and you also got to have, there's no dumb question as well out there. But I think just taking some time, if you're an experienced individual, if you're a young kid just getting started and it's your first year, if you need to call in an experienced individual to help you clip your calf, then do that, because you're going to learn, and going that route or doing some clinics or something like that prior to this so that you feel like you have a little extra confidence is going to be beneficial as well along the way. But I think just finishing strong, I think is what I always tell everybody. Don't try to deviate from the course. Just stay strong. Know that we're doing all the right things. Believe in the process, and hopefully success will show up on your side of things when it's all said and done.
Very good. Well, as we round out kind of our hour here, I know these guys have families, but they're gracious to give us some time here. So if you've got questions, please now is the time to ask. I know we don't have a ton of people watching tonight, which is okay. I mean, I would rather the right people be watching that are able to take some information out of this than just a bunch of numbers. That's more important to me. If we can help out one person here, that's really what this is all about. So we do have a question we're going to drag up here on the screen. Chris over there in a beautiful, great state of Ohio is curious to know if you can overfeed Epic. Nick, go ahead.
I've tried, and I've never found a max point of too much to feed. So I would say absolutely not. It's a very safe product. I feel very confident in that. They actually like eating it over maybe some competitors. There's some things in there that I think they enjoy the texture and the flavor of. And so, nope, you can't feed too much of it. Or at least I haven't. I've fed quite a bit of it. So.
He's not saying to feed off label, though. Right, Nick?
Exactly.
Yeah. Follow the label, you'll be in good shape.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What other kind of questions, if you're watching here, how can we help you? I would say one other thing to maybe kind of bring up is, as you start to finish out your routine or whatever, how do you, because I know that I struggled with this when I was younger, right? When I was, 11 or 12 and first kind of showing steers and or cattle. And I remember walking through the ring, getting that 3 minutes, like what Baylor was talking about, and then just being frustrated. Like I did all that and like thinking that I actually worked really hard, which I probably didn't, truthfully, but I thought I did. And so how can you keep motivation and kind of digging a little bit deeper into this, like psychologically, how do you keep motivation when you know that, man, I probably only have 3 minutes and I've got, 1,000 hours wrapped up in this animal or whatever it is. So how can you maintain motivation kind of going in? Baylor, I'm going to kick that one to you because I know that you've shown it at every level and have had unbelievable success. So how do you kind of find and keep that motivation, even when you think things might not go your way in the end, but just knowing that you put your best effort forward?
I may be different than some people, but if I didn't have I know this might sound stereotypical, but if I didn't have this business right here and showing, I don't know what I would have been doing for the last 10 years of my life. I mean, it's honestly been a blessing. And there to keep motivation, I mean, I think going to shows and if you don't win or if you don't do as good as you wanted to, then you look at those people that did do that good and that are standing in the backdrop and I know for sure that you're sitting there telling yourself, boy, wonder what day that'll be me. I mean, that could be awesome if that could be me and I could be standing over there with my family getting a picture at the backdrop with the judge. I mean, there's no better feeling than that. But you just got to stay on track and you if you're doing this and you have a calf, you want to be doing it all for the right reason and for the love of the game, and you have to stay motivated, I think, on that, Nathan. That's a great point, because if you ever get down about your project or anything and you lose a couple weeks or so of max effort, then you're not getting the most out of it, what you can. And if you want to be in the winner's circle someday and you want to become one of those people that finishes at the top, you have to stay motivated and you have to give it everything you got and leave it all on the table. Because if you don't, then you're not doing it for the right reason, and it doesn't end well, if you will. So I think you just have to stay. You got to keep your mind right, and you got to keep it going in the same direction the whole time and keep going and pushing through hard all the way through.
Great answer. Great answer. Thank you for sharing that. As we round this out, let's get back to Andy's question here real quick about using Game On steers.
Yeah, so actually we've done quite a bit more with that here in the last year to 18 months with some different steer families especially, and have found great results. I would say just with the texture there, you might end up drenching it, which is something that we see in a few of our products. And with that, I think you're going to probably get a little bit more out of it as far as its effectiveness, but it works incredible in terms of on those steers laying down a good hard fat. And I think on cattle especially that maybe are a little harder doing, a little harder muscled or tighter hided, you're going to see that product show some pretty great results. So yes, it works great. We got some customers currently that are feeding it and love it. And if you have any questions on maybe how to do that, go ahead and give me a call or reach out to Sunglo and we can get you some more details on that.
Good question. Thanks, Andy. Well, as we kind of tie this thing up, I want to just say thank you for those that tuned in. I want to say thank you to Baylor and Wes for jumping on here and giving their awesome information. I mean, these guys, they live this thing, and they are just a wealth of knowledge between the two of them, and we appreciate their business very much. If you're a Sunglo customer, we appreciate your business. We thank you for your continued support of our program. If you're not, we would love to earn it. We would love to earn your business. We feel like we've got a lineup that's incredible from a feed standpoint and also from a supplement standpoint. And we want to help you maximize your calf's potential. And whether your goal is to do better at your county fair or to try to win Tulsa, we can help get that done for you. So appreciate everybody tuning in. Again, this will be recorded. As soon as we hit stop, you'll be able to go back and rewatch it here on our Facebook page. And then tomorrow we'll have it posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate everybody watching and have a safe night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.